not keeping proper records. Some schools actually disregarded official warnings about hiring staff without the proper checks, and there was no way of ensuring whether those required checks had been made after the event.
Our view at Ofsted is that this record should be kept at the school. It's for the school to have a record of which staff are on its premises and who's been checked and who hasn't. And that record should be available to school inspectors. At the moment it isn't.
It was the then Education Secretary Ruth Kelly who ordered this inquiry after it emerged that 88 sex offenders like Paul Reeve had been allowed to work in schools, and that followed questions as to how SOA murderer Ian Huntley had been able to work as a school caretaker. When 5 News spoke to Ruth Kelly 6 months ago, she gave us this assurance.
What we can do, and what I can do, is give parents the assurance that we will have a system in place which is as robust as possible.
6 months on, and a new Education Secretary must come up with new measures to plug the gaps. Overseas teachers will have to have Criminal Records Bureau checks, like UK teachers, and schools will have to be as thorough with agency supply teachers as they are with permanent staff.
In order to make all of this clear, we will tighten regulations so that schools are legally required to obtain confirmation from agencies that CRB checks have been carried out and keep a record of this, just as they do for permanent staff.
Pete Saunders was himself sexually abused at school. Now he runs a charity for adults who've gone through that. He says despite today's report, parents shouldn't panic.
I think children today in schools and other kinds of institutions are safer, and there are far more checks and balances with the system than there were even just 5 or 10 years ago, certainly from my own childhood when there was virtually nothing. I think we are going in the right direction.
Nevertheless, today's report reveals another government system that's been found wanting, and when it comes to the protection of children, the public will expect nothing less than the maximum possible security.
Andy, child protection is such an important issue for the public, but the government came under fire from perhaps a surprising source today.
Yes, an extraordinary intervention from the Chief Constable of Dyfed and Paris Police Force in Wales, Terry Grange, who said basically that the government was being blackmailed by certain newspapers like the News of the World into changing their policy on what to do about paedophiles. Specifically, he claimed that the government was moving towards the idea of some kind of Sarah's law, whereby people living in a neighbourhood were entitled to know whether there was a paedophile living near them. Now, he was very concerned about this. The government today has said there is no problem about listening to issues that are raised by newspapers. They deny that they are being led down this particular route by a campaign by newspapers, but nevertheless certain people are saying, well, if Sarah's law was rejected a couple of years ago, why does it now appear to be back on the table, with a Home Office minister being dispatched this summer to the United States to see just how the law is working there?
Andy at Westminster, thanks very much. England will be hoping to shake off their lacklustre World Cup form when they meet Sweden tonight. While they've already booked their place in the next round, a good performance will show what a force England can be in the finals. 5 Sports reporter Alex Thomas reports now from Cologne.
For once, England's destiny isn't up in the air before the final group game of a major tournament. Sweden face a bleaker World Cup future unless they clinch victory, hopefully with their star strikers' help. But England's fans think their side will have the better ball control.
We should be okay, we should be 2-0. Young Walcott should come on, I think. Up front is a problem. Rooney's not fit, Owen's not fit.
How worried are you with Owen's form and fitness?
I fancy him to get off the mark tonight. I think 2-1 England, I fancy Mark Owen to get off the mark.
And Germany certainly got off the mark quickly in their final Group A match against Ecuador. Miroslav Klose's opening goal came in the 4th minute. And he hit the net again just before half-time. He's now the tournament's leading scorer with 4 goals. In the second half, Lukas Podolski sealed a 3-0 victory, sending the hosts through to the next round in style. The top 2 teams in Groups A and B started the day not knowing when or against which team they'd play their first knockout match. That confusion is starting to clear. Germany have finished top of Group A. That means if England win or draw tonight, they'll avoid the hosts and have an extra day's rest before playing Ecuador. If Sweden triumph, they'll qualify, and England will have to face Germany in Munich. Not all bad. Last time that happened, England won 5-1. With qualification assured, Wayne Rooney and Michael Owen will start for England tonight. The perfect chance for both men to recover the form and fitness they're lacking. Unlike England, Sweden need a victory to avoid Trinidad and Tobago qualifying instead of them. England say they're not worried that it's nearly 40 years since they last beat Sweden. Breaking the record isn't a motivation. Finishing top of their group with a perfect record is.
So Alex, is it all about the performance then tonight?
Well, yes, you could argue that, Helen, because in many ways it doesn't matter if England lose, they're through to the next round anyway. We'd really like to see Wayne Rooney and Michael Owen, England's first choice striking partnership before this tournament and before their injuries got in the way. We'd like to see them firing on all cylinders. That would give Sven-Göran Eriksson hope that England could do well in the later stages. But with Germany winning earlier this afternoon, then they loom if England should slip up and Sweden lose. And certainly England as well would like to avoid Argentina until the and not meet them in the quarter-finals.
Alex, thanks very much for joining us from Germany. Now, you've heard of 2 Jags Prescott, and now it's going to be 2 Jets Blair. It's thought the Prime Minister is about to get 2 planes to fly him on official trips. But is Blair Force One really worth it? 5's Catherine Jacob reports.
Whizzing around the world at short notice, from South Africa to America to Australia, is part of the Prime Minister's job description. But during his years as Premier, he's always had to travel on someone else's plane. Until now. You've heard of Air Force One, well soon there'll be Blair Force One. Almost. The Prime Minister's to get 2 new dedicated planes to be used on official business. At the moment, whenever the Prime Minister wants to jet off, he has to borrow the Queen's flight or charter a plane. But in future, though the make hasn't been confirmed, the government will have 1 large plane for long haul with a smaller one for short trips. Oh, and both will be second-hand.
The system at the moment is a hodgepodge of using some really very elderly and quite expensive to operate RAF aircraft, using British Airways and typically first class of course, and sometimes using other chartered aircraft on an ad hoc basis. That is really not a good way to run what is effectively a corporate flight department.
The planes won't just be used by the government. The Queen and her family will also travel on them. Her journeys take priority. So how much will they cost? Well, at the moment, the government spends £9.5 million a year on chartering flights. Downing Street sources say the new planes will cost £12.3 million for a permanent lease. They insist that long-term savings will bring the cost to the taxpayer down. But critics aren't convinced.
The truth is, right now, this is going to cost the taxpayer nearly £3 million a year extra cash, at a time when we're seeing jobs in the National Health Service, doctors and nurses being cut, and other cuts to frontline services. It feels like the wrong thing to do. It feels like the action of a government that's getting increasingly out of touch.
The planes may be no match for Mr Bush's Air Force One with its onboard gym and all the trimmings, but they will of course have the latest security and communications equipment. Full details are expected to be announced next week, but the planes won't come into service until early 2008. By that time, of course, Mr Blair is unlikely to be in power. Unfortunately, Brown or even Cameron Force One doesn't have quite the same ring. Catherine Jacob, 5 News.
The US military in Iraq has confirmed